In a tiny Illinois town the night before Thanksgiving in 2021, Leslie Reeves and Chris Smith met for their first date at a bar. They hit it off and went back to Chris's house to make a midnight pizza. They didn't know that Leslie's ex was stalking them and followed them to the house. Their night of flirting and fun ended up with one of them dead and the other fighting for their life. Hi everyone, my name's Anne, but I also go by my nickname Nene. I like to focus on Midwest true crime because I'm a Minnesota farmer's daughter. Today we're going to go to Illinois to talk about the murder of Leslie Reeves and the attempted murder of Chris Smith. I think this case might have gotten overshadowed by the Waukesha parade attack, which happened just 4 days prior. And I think when I looked at the map, they were like 4 or 6 hours apart. And that was such a massive tragedy that I think it just overshadowed this one in the news. Not to say that this case isn't tragic, because a woman who dedicated her life to helping others lost her life. But it is also an inspiring story of grit and resilience. Leslie Jane was born on June 26, 1976 in Missouri. She loved to dance, travel, collect shoes, and listen to 80s music. She was beautiful inside and out. She was also a smart cookie. She received a bachelor's degree in engineering from the University of Missouri-Rolla. She then got a master's degree in engineering from the University of Kansas. Her friend Jenny said, quote, "She had a magnetism to her because when you were talking to her, there was no one else in the world who existed in that moment to her," unquote.
She was so loved in the community.
She was a real sweetheart. She seemed very personable.
Bubbly, upbeat, kind, generous.
She was a light of a lot of people's lives. She was always smiling. She was a very good mother, lived for her kids.
She got married and had 2 sons, but I didn't find a lot of information on her marriage. Eventually she got divorced, but I'm not sure when. Leslie lived in Troy, Illinois, which isn't far from St. Louis. Leslie worked for several years as a petroleum engineer, but she wanted to help people and make a difference in her community. She started her own business called the All You Studio and Party Place, which blended helping people with fitness goals and organizing parties. Something that was very important to Leslie was women's safety.
Hi, I'm Leslie from All You Studio. Empower yourself against aggression and assault as we teach you easy-to-learn self-defense techniques. Power up!
She taught classes on self-defense and concealed carry. She held a weekly yoga class that was also a support group for domestic violence victims. Spreading awareness on domestic abuse was important to her, and she gave speeches on women's safety. She helped women who left abusive relationships find places to live and got them resources. She was on the board of directors for Good Samaritan House, which was a domestic violence shelter. In 2018, Leslie started volunteering at Call for Help, an agency that helps SA victims.
She's a great member of our Chamber of Commerce and does a lot of presentations on self-defense and awareness.
Whether she was doing some counseling or countless defense courses, she was always encouraging individuals to do whatever they needed to be safe. There's tremendous impact on the community.
An advocate and champion of women, women's rights, and especially women that were abused.
In November 2021, when Leslie was 45, she was trying online dating. She matched with 48-year-old Chris Smith, and the two started chatting. Chris was divorced and had a daughter and lived about an hour away in Farmersville, Illinois. Chris has a great attitude. You will see that he is feisty and stubborn and resilient. Chris worked for a pool contractor and was a singer in a rock and roll band. He grew up in St. Louis but loved living in Farmersville because he liked the feel of a small town. It was a place where everybody knew everybody. People described Chris as a nice guy. He was a simple guy and was happy hanging out in his backyard with his garden. He grew banana trees and a whole lot of pumpkins. He donated his pumpkins to the children of Farmersville so they could paint or carve them. Chris had a close relationship with his mom Sharon and sister Ashley. He rented a house in Farmersville and lived there with his dog Tiki, who he adopted as a puppy 3 years prior. His ex-wife lived close by, so Chris got to spend a lot of time with his daughter. Chris lived a humble but happy life. After talking for a week and a half, Chris and Leslie decided to meet for a first date. They chose Wednesday, November 24th, which was the night before Thanksgiving. On Chris's way home from work that day, he considered calling and canceling the date.
Driving home, I was like, well, maybe I should just stay in tonight. I should have listened to my gut feeling when that voice in my head said that.
A friend of his was performing that night at a local bar, and that was where they were going on their date. Since Chris was a singer too, he wanted to support his friend, so he kept the date. That evening, Leslie drove her van to Farmersville and met Chris at the Uptown Saloon to watch Chris's friend perform. Leslie did all the right things when it comes to meeting a guy in person who you've met online. She told her family and friends his name, where they were going, and she eventually gave them Chris's address. She texted updates to her friend Nanette throughout the night to keep in touch. The night grew late, and it was now around midnight and Thanksgiving Day. Chris and Leslie were having a great time, so they decided to go back to Chris's house. They put a frozen pizza in the oven and hung out in the kitchen to chat. Later that morning, when Nanette woke up, she was worried. She hadn't received any text from Leslie about how the evening ended. Nanette texted and called her and got no response. She called police.
Hi, I'm greatly concerned about my friend. Can someone do a welfare check?
Nanette didn't want to wait for police, so she drove to Farmersville herself. She parked in front of Chris's house. Chris's 16-year-old neighbor saw Nanette park there, and she came up and talked to her. She asked if she was there for Chris, and Nanette said no, she was checking on her friend. The neighbor walked up to Chris's back door and right away noticed the glass in the door was broken. As she got closer, she saw Chris lying on the kitchen floor in a pool of blood. She called 911.
Nobody's answering the door, and the back window's shattered, and there's a body, and there's a foot I saw on the floor. I'm only 16. I can't deal with this.
EMT Dennis Hobson was the first to arrive at the house. Since this was a small town, he knew Chris. He found Chris lying in a fetal position. He had been shot in the head and barely had a pulse. Tiki was curled up next to Chris. Dennis shook Chris and screamed his name 3 times. Dennis said Chris gasped and said, quote, "Denny, I'm fucking freezing," unquote. Dennis then found Leslie laying on the living room floor near the Christmas tree. She had been shot in her head, but was no longer alive. Dennis called for more help.
Sheriff's office.
Give me some help. I got one alive and one dead.
Police and more medics rushed to the house. Chris was in very bad shape. It was later estimated Chris and Leslie had been shot around 1 a.m., so Chris had laid there on the floor bleeding for 14 hours. He had lost a massive amount of blood. They think the only reason he was still alive was because the broken glass in the door let in cold air, and this lowered his body temperature, and it slowed the amount of blood that he was losing. They think Tiki was curled up next to him, trying to keep him warm.
My neighbor found me on the floor 14 hours later with my dog cuddled up next to me, trying to keep you warm.
Chris was rushed to a hospital in Springfield. His mom and sister rushed to be by his side. His prognosis was not good. He had been shot close range in the head. Doctors performed a craniotomy to relieve swelling on his brain and removed some bullet fragments, but the bullet was in an area of his brain that was too dangerous to remove. His mom and sister were told if Chris survived, he would never walk, talk, or even smile again. Doctors placed him in a medically induced coma to give his brain and body time to heal. Police began investigating the crime scene, and right away they knew a third person was involved because they didn't find the weapon. They found 2 silver 9mm shell casings. They found a burnt pizza in the oven. The fridge was pulled away from the wall a little bit, and some chairs were knocked over. Police think Chris and Leslie were in the kitchen cooking the pizza when somebody came to the back door. They think they pulled the fridge out in an attempt to try to move it in front of the door and block this person.
So he apparently came to my back side door of my house, ripped open the storm door. We were in the kitchen cooking a pizza. She wanted to move the fridge in front of the door, and then apparently I got down like this to hold the door. He fired to the door, and that's when the bullet came in my head.
The intruder was then able to get in the house, and Leslie ran into the living room. The intruder followed her and shot her once in her head, killing her instantly. It was a pretty gruesome crime scene because blood was everywhere. One investigator described the blood in the kitchen as being corner to corner. Police asked Chris's mom and sister if they knew anyone who would want to hurt Chris, and they couldn't think of anybody because Chris didn't have any enemies.
No way. How? Why? Like, who? Yeah, who would have done that?
Police asked Leslie's friends and family the same question. Nanette and another friend of Leslie's named Amy immediately thought of one person, Robert Tarr, who went by Bobby. He was Leslie's ex, and they had dated on and off. When Leslie ended things for good, Bobby didn't take it well. Leslie thought Bobby was stalking her. Leslie told Nanette she needed to go no contact with Bobby.
She said, I am going to completely block Bobby from email, texts, phone calls.
A few weeks before Leslie was murdered, she had been on another first date and Bobby showed up. Afterwards, she texted Amy and said, quote, I could be killed by him someday if I don't cut all contact, unquote. Amy told police she had never had a good feeling about Bobby, and Leslie was scared of him.
She was terrified of him, and rightfully so.
Thanksgiving night, police went to Bobby's home in Collinsville. He never asked them why they were there. Police asked him to come to the police station for questioning, and Bobby willingly showed up. When they asked him about Leslie, Bobby said they were still in a relationship.
You and Leslie have a lot of problems. I wouldn't say no worse than any average couple.
They then told him Leslie was dead.
Leslie is dead. What? Can you help me shed some light on this? How did she die? She was murdered. What happened? That's why we're here with you. I'm not involved in anything.
That looks so fake to me. He told them they were still in a relationship, so if you had found out your girlfriend was dead, I think you'd be a little more emotional about it. Granted, people do handle grief and emotions in different ways, but Bobby just didn't seem shocked at all.
You know what Farmersville is? Farmersville. No, I can't say that I do. I've never been there. I've never heard of it.
They asked him what he did the night before Thanksgiving. He said he went to a friend's house to pick up some money and got back to his house around 6:30 p.m. He said he stayed home the rest of the night with his 17-year-old daughter, Shelby. Police questioned Shelby, and she said her dad left 2 times that night. The first was around 6:30, and he got home around 7 p.m., but said he had to leave again. He came home about 2 hours later, and Shelby said he was crying and said he missed Leslie. She said she fell asleep shortly before 10 p.m., but woke up around 2:45 a.m. when she heard her dad doing laundry and pacing around the house. Bobby told her he couldn't sleep. Shelby also told police her dad owned 2 guns, a black Glock and a small green one. She said she had seen the green one that morning in her dad's sock drawer, but it wasn't there anymore. Police talked to Bobby again and told him, hey, your story doesn't match your daughter's story, so Bobby changed his story. He said he went to his friend's house twice that night, but was home for the rest of the night by 8 p.m. Bobby's 2013 Volkswagen Jetta was captured on multiple traffic cameras between Collinsville and Farmersville the night of the shootings. One camera captured his license plate at a Pilot gas station near Troy. Bobby stopped there shortly after midnight to get gas. Police confronted him with the gas station receipt. Bobby claimed he didn't remember getting gas that night, but he was also like, what's the big deal? I filled my car up with gas.
So you're a liar. Because I don't remember doing that. You don't remember being out after midnight.
Police had caught Bobby in a lot of lies, and they had digital evidence that placed him in Farmersville on the night of the shootings, so they arrested him for murder and attempted murder. Bobby then came up with a new story. He said Leslie asked him to go with her to Farmersville that night because friends of friends were playing in a band. He said he couldn't because his daughter was spending the night. She asked him if he would at least follow her to Farmersville in case her van broke down because it was unreliable. Nanette and Amy doubted that story because they knew Leslie was scared of Bobby. She wouldn't ask him to go anywhere with her. Bobby claims he followed her to Chris's house where she parked her van.
I think we arrived there around 7:30. I parked in front of her van in front of his house. I left. I never went back to Farmersville again.
He said he lied to police because there was tension between his daughter and Leslie, and he didn't want his daughter to know he was with Leslie that night. A week after the crime, Bobby's friend Billy called police and said Bobby called him from jail. He thinks Bobby was asking him to get rid of the gun, but doing it in code because he knew that all calls from the jail were recorded.
I got some special aluminum brackets that I need you to get because they're for another job that I didn't tell Dad about yet. So don't say nothing to him.
They're aluminum?
Yeah, get them and get rid of them.
Police went to Bobby's house and they thoroughly searched it and the yard. They didn't find a gun, but they did find aluminum deck brackets. A few days later, Bobby's brother gave police a bag, and inside was a Springfield Hellcat 9mm. He claimed he found it in the yard that had just been searched by police. Testing proved this was the gun used to shoot Leslie and Chris. Leslie's DNA was found on the guide rod. I'm not a gun person, so I'm not sure what a guide rod is, and I even tried Googling it, and it wasn't much help. I think it's something that's on the front of the gun, or maybe like underneath the front part of the gun. If you know what it is, please let me know in the comments. Bobby claimed Leslie's DNA was on it because it was her gun. He said he bought it, and then Leslie bought it from him. Now, that was another story that didn't have a lot of evidence to back it up. As part of her mission to spread awareness about women's safety, Leslie often went to a gun range. She organized a class called Girls with Guns.
Leslie accompanied me here on several occasions.
A firearm instructor named Howard, who became friends with Leslie, said he never saw her bring a Springfield to shoot. He thinks her DNA got on the gun because she was shot at close range. And that would make sense. You know, if she got shot, maybe some blood splattered up onto it, or just some of her skin cells got on the gun that way. Howard said Leslie knew her way around a gun, and she was a very good shooter. He said it was unfortunate that she didn't bring her gun with her that night.
Had Leslie taken the gun with her, I assure you the outcome would have been different.
Meanwhile, as police tried to build their case against Bobby Tarr, Chris laid in a hospital bed in a medically induced coma. His mom and sister stayed faithfully by his bedside.
I want to be able to fix him, and I can't fix him.
They held his hand, talked to him, and sang to him. Chris suffered 3 strokes while he was in the hospital. It wasn't until early January 2022 that Chris woke up.
It's my Christmas present. Yes, he's awake and he's fighting.
Look at Mom. Look over at Mom.
Chris had no memory of what happened that night. The last thing he remembered was driving home from work. He had no memory of Leslie. When he was asked about her, he said, "Who's Leslie?"
I remember bits and pieces maybe from the hospital and maybe from the ambulance ride, but it was like a dream, like a nightmare.
He was transferred to a hospital in St. Louis for rehab. He slowly regained some functions, but a doctor told Chris he most likely would be in a wheelchair the rest of his life. Chris was too stubborn for that.
When the doctor told me that I'd never walk again, I looked at him and said, yes, I will, because you told the wrong person. If you told me I can't do something, I'm going to do it just out of spite.
Chris is permanently paralyzed on his left side, but he's not letting that hold him back. He relearned how to walk and talk and do basic everyday tasks like brush his teeth. He has spent hours in the gym, regaining strength and working with physical and occupational therapists. He still uses a wheelchair, but can walk with a cane and was able to exceed the doctor's expectations.
It's been a long, hard road. I lost my life, and now I've got to start all over again.
I'm taking baby steps.
What are the everyday things that you miss that you can't do now?
Working in my yard, working in my garden, being with my daughter every afternoon after school.
I want to be able to run. I want to be able to go golf. I want to be able to throw a football without falling down like I did the other day. Trying to brush your teeth, tie your shoe. I mean, just everyday things we take for granted.
I've literally lost my life without being killed.
If there's any neurosurgeons out there, any researchers out there, please get a hold of me. I'll be your guinea pig. Just make me normal and give me my life back, please. Tough doesn't even describe it.
In 2022, an inmate came forward and said Bobby paid him $10,000 to kill Chris and the lead investigator on the case, Jeff Roach. Bobby was charged with 2 counts solicitation of murder. Of course, he denies it and said that he had only loaned this inmate $10,000 for his bail bond. Bobby just had an answer for everything. Bobby's trial began in April 2024. Chris didn't attend because he didn't think he'd be able to sit quietly in the courtroom.
I know myself. There's no way. No.
The prosecutor claimed the motive was that Bobby couldn't handle Leslie living a life without him. There was no physical evidence that tied Bobby to the crime. His fingerprints and DNA were not at the crime scene. Police searched his car and didn't find blood or broken pieces of glass from the kitchen door. There was so much blood at the crime scene, Bobby's defense lawyer said it would have been impossible for Bobby to have been the shooter and not get a drop of blood on him. But the prosecutor said this is because Chris and Leslie laid on the floor bleeding for 14 hours. So when the shooter left directly after shooting them, there wasn't as much blood at the crime scene as there was when they were found 14 hours later. And remember, Bobby's daughter woke up around 2:45 and heard her dad doing laundry. Police did have strong digital evidence. Traffic cameras placed Bobby's car en route from his home to Chris's home. It appeared Bobby followed Leslie to Farmersville and then did searches on his phone for Chris Smith and tried to find Chris's Facebook profile. Bobby then drove home and texted a friend, quote, "I don't feel like she would drive that far for a party or go out with a girlfriend. I think it's for a dude," unquote. Bobby did a Google search to see if police can track his phone if he uses a VPN. He obviously couldn't find a way to hide his phone's location because cell towers proved Bobby left home a second time and drove back to Farmersville. They think Bobby got to Chris's house around 1 a.m. and tried to get in through the kitchen door. That's when Leslie and Chris tried to keep him out by moving the fridge, but Bobby shot Chris through the door and broke the glass to get in. He chased Leslie into the living room where he shot and killed her. The jury deliberated for 3 hours and found Bobby guilty of all charges. Though Chris didn't attend the trial, he did make it a point to attend the sentencing in July of 2024.
I cannot wait till July 1st till I get to walk in there, and I'm going to try my best to skip in that courtroom. Be like, hey, you know what? Hey, you shot the wrong person. You really did, dude.
I've been waiting for this day for 2.5 years.
Bobby was sentenced to a total of 85 years in prison for the murder, attempted murder, and other related charges. At the time I'm recording this, he's still waiting trial for the solicitation of murder charges. Chris moved into his mom's house in St. Louis.
He doesn't stop, and we call him Unstoppable Chris.
Chris was unable to take care of Tiki anymore, so she moved in with people he knew, but Chris visits her often. He calls her his furry angel. Chris's entire life was changed drastically by a man he didn't even know.
He murdered her, shot me, left me for dead. And all I did was meet her for a beer. That was it.
I just don't get it. All I was doing was trying to go out on a date.
I'm very angry that this happened, that guy did that to me over a woman. I mean, come on, man, seriously? It's total BS, and I shouldn't be in this position. I should be driving home from work right now.
I have one evil man. Just take it all from me.
Bobby tried to kill Chris that night, but he failed, and he underestimated how much of a fighting spirit Chris has.
I'm winning, Bobby Tar.
Chris says to never take anything in life for granted.
Appreciate that you can tie your shoes with one hand. You can button your shirt. Enjoy every second of life. Soak it up with your kids. Soak it up with the loved ones. Take nothing for granted. Because in the blink of an eye, it's gone. Just like that.
The hardest part of his recovery is not being able to see his 12-year-old daughter as much as he used to. He lives 2 hours from where she lives with his ex-wife, and Chris can't drive, so it makes seeing her difficult.
I miss her. She was my little pea in the pod. I mean, we did everything together.
Chris started singing again with his rock and roll band.
Thank the Lord, I have a voice and I can sing.
He also started dating again. In 2023, he began a relationship with a woman named Michelle. In October 2024, during a performance with his band, Chris asked Michelle to marry him.
You marry me.
What'd you say, Lindsay? We gotta say it again, now.
I just asked her if she'd marry me, guys.
Chris said Michelle is an angel who loves and accepts him the way he is.
Even though we met after what happened, I don't see him in the wheelchair. I just see him as the person that he is. And so that's what I fell in love with.
It is a true miracle that Chris is alive.
He laid on that floor for 13 hours with his dog by his side. I mean, he's a miracle.
He's working on getting more strength and more functions back, and he's received some stem cell transplants. He hopes to someday be able to walk without a cane. His recovery is seriously incredible. I mean, look at the difference in him from when he gave an interview 3 months after being shot compared to when he talked with 48 Hours 3 years after being shot.
That's all I can do right there. That's all the feel. I mean, I'm starting over from scratch.
Good Lord, give me a do-over. How many people get a second chance in life?
Chris has so much to be proud of for how far he's come. He's not only overcome all of this stuff that's been thrown at him, but he's turning that around so he can help others. Chris created a website, has become a motivational speaker, and is writing a book. He helps people overcome personal and professional struggles. He also helps crime survivors and others with traumatic brain injuries.
Having a positive mental mindset. Positive surroundings. Negativity is not good for brain sealing at all. I mean, I tell myself over and over again, I'm going to walk. Check mark, I'm walking again. I'll be with the cane, and it looks kind of goofy, a little hairy at times, but I can do it. Erase the word can't from your vocabulary. Say, I'm unable to right now at the moment, but erase the word can't. Because you can. You can do anything you want. The power of the human spirit is so powerful. No time for pity parties. You gotta get up and do it. I mean, you have to. Believe yourself. If you love it, you love it. You want it, you will it. You can do it.
The biggest takeaway he hopes people get from hearing his story is that no matter what, do not give up.
I want to motivate, inspire, and help people.
Hopefully my story can help other people. Maybe give people motivation if they think their life's crap and they've got nothing, they want to give up. Don't give up. I was told I will never walk again. Other doctors said I would never talk or anything again. Well,
here we are.
Here we are.
Life, deals you the hand that you get. And you can either sit and sulk about it or make the best of the situation and fight for what you want. If you want something that bad, go after it and don't stop until you get it. Difficult roads lead to beautiful destinations. No matter how bleak things look, it will get better.
If I can come back from this and recover from this, any goal you set is achievable and possible. Don't ever give up.
Don't ever give up on anything in life. Never give up.
Chris told 48 Hours that he was half the man he used to be, but I saw a comment on that video from somebody who said Chris was twice the man he used to be. I wish I could have found out more information about Leslie and her family and how they're coping. From my understanding, her sons now live full-time with their father. They're young and have to grow up without a mother now. Leslie had a passion to teach women about safety, and she helped women escape abusive situations. It's so ironic and unfair that she died from domestic violence.
We're really, really sad for her children and all those that she's touched.
We miss her laugh and her smile, the thing that she fought the hardest for, and then to see that how it ended.
That is just going to be so much missed. The greatest of tragedies, that's how her life ended, way, way too short at 45.
That's all I have for this case. I'd love to hear your thoughts below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.